right, if you would like to continue with your recommended appropriations and revenues.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, we're now looking at 2009 versus 2008. And as all of you know, there are a tremendous amount of moving parts on this. The department heads submit their recommendations, their proposals. Ray and I look at it and make our recommendations, and I don't know what is going to come out until I consolidate it. This is what it came out on the appropriation side. As obviously the most significant increases are in health insurance and debt service. The two of them are over $1 million. The net appropriations at the very bottom is only up $22,000, but the spending appropriations are really up $1.5 million when you factor out the reversal of the sale of property of $1,029,000 and the reserve for uncollected taxes. So we're really up about $1.5 million in spending. This budget, as I mentioned to you, is $140,000 under the cap as presented to you. This afternoon, after looking at this 50 times, I discovered that I omitted $60,000 for waste removal for a request for recycling. So the $60,000 has to go in there, which once again, as an estimate, will mean that we're $200,000 over the cap spending. Once again, that's an estimate until I get really hard numbers and work with the auditor on that, but I think that's where we are.
Can we explain the recycling? The recycling issue is that the market for the commodities has dried up, and historically, recycling was viewed to reduce tonnage, but it turned also into to be a revenue generator because there was a market for the product. The Chinese markets have dried up in terms of paper and metal, so now we are actually paying. We're still reducing the tonnage, which is a good thing to encourage recycling, but we're no longer getting the revenue stream. And in fact, we are paying now to have the recyclable materials after they're picked up removed because there's no market. They're actually being stored by our vendor in a warehouse until the markets improve. So we're in effect paying a storage fee. Other communities have experienced where the recycling company, or smaller, have stopped picking up recycled products and they have no service. In Bergen County, there's 6 towns with no recycling market or vendor. So that's why we have to add money to the budget that wasn't there before, because the market has changed right underneath us. And Robert, can you also talk about the full pension funding? I know that's one of the major assumptions.
Yes, I will. Initially, I met with 3 council members that are here. We looked at 2 options. One was with half funding of the pension. The other is full pension funding. This is full pension funding, which doesn't put off the pain. In speaking with our auditor yesterday, Dave Evans, he indicated to me that we may not have a alternative. We may be forced to go to partial funding. So now, once again, these are the appropriations to deliver the services that we're recommending. Once again, I know that these adding the $60,000 or $200,000 over the cap. The next step in this is I needed to determine what was the maximum that I could tax for. The maximum, because if I did not factor in the reserve fund collected tax reduction, the tax increases would have been over $1.6 million as opposed to $1,176,000. We actually came in around the maximum is somewhere around a little more than $1.2 million. So I looked at our sources of revenues. The surplus, we generated $3.8 million in 2008. I'm requesting $4.8 million here. I'm going to bump that up to $5 million, but I'm going to reverse the reserve for uncollected taxes. Last year, as you know, we significantly increased our non-taxable municipal revenues by $350,000. We don't have to decrease any of the revenues. I'm not going to recommend significant increases in any of those revenues. The main surplus driver in municipal sources is interest income. We budgeted $390,000. We generated $1,021,000. But as all of you know, As all of you know, we've had significant rate reduction on the part of the Federal Reserve for short-term interest rates. Number one. Number two, our surplus is going down. And number three, I'm sitting on unspent capital funds that we're going to use for roads, sewers, and the Hartley Dodge. So that would be non-recurring municipal revenue, which you don't want to put in the budget.
The million plus non-taxable, that is not all interest income.
We generated $1,021,000 in interest income. We budgeted $390,000. That is the main generator, besides the reserve fund collected taxes. That's the main generator.
So we under budgeted almost $1 million.
About $600,000 in the case of interest income, but once again, we didn't. We're not spending $12 million that we're sitting on. My assumption here, which I have no idea on state aid and grants, hold it at $1.2 million. That may be until I hear otherwise. Pardon me?
That may be nothing from what I'm hearing. I mean, that's the League of Municipalities is saying.
Pardon me?
The League of Municipalities is pretty much saying count on nothing. So, we may have a huge hole there.
Oh, that all right.
Yeah,
All
I mean,
right.
anything is going to be a significant cut, but there's
I haven't
not much hope for
okay.
anything. Yeah.
We cut as you'll see, we cut the electric utility surplus in half from $9 million to $4.5 million. I'm still going to recommend that we transfer the $3,450,000 as we did last year. Now, with that, in order for the property taxes to remain slightly under the maximum levy cap, my last alternative was to reduce the reserve fund collected taxes from $1,496,000 to $1,050,000. Questions?
There was one thing. I go back to you may be forced to do the partial funding of the pensions, even though we have the money to, or have budgeted to do that, or had planned to pay the full funding. What is forcing us to go to the partial funding?
The state.
The state, yeah.
The legislature.
But they're not forcing us. You have that choice.
The
it's gonna be
latest versions of force.
Oh, so then we're going to be mandated to not only do the 0.5%, but the 8.25% going forward, regardless, even though.
Even though we want to pay our bills.
Another gimmick. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
This budget reflects that we're going to pay our bills
Yeah.
on time, not accrue a liability at 8.25%
Yeah.
interest, and just push off a bill into a drawer. We want to pay our bills and not build the time up.
Well, just as badly before was you choose whether you want to pay it or not, but even if you chose to pay it, you were still going to have to pay the 8.25% going forward,
Yes.
even if you had paid it off. I mean, this is it's the same smoke and mirrors.
So,
But go
so
ahead.
I wanted to reflect. I wanted to see, can we put the full funding in here for the pension and still meet the property tax levy cap? And the answer is yes. Yes, we can.
So what we could do, let me go back, we could fully fund what we owe and hold that difference in reserve if we're not paying the full bill to the.
If those are the laws, okay, yeah, we would put it in a reserve and.
Because we're going to have to pay it eventually.
That is correct.
Yeah,
You know, I mean,
it would be
we're
crazy to
we're
put it
stuck
off, so
before.
we would just, shift
Exactly.
it to another line and have a surplus.
It's sad that we have to pay the percentage of anything.
There
We
are
don't pay it in full.
there are probably several municipalities that could not go to full funding because
Yeah.
they didn't have the financial flexibility that we still had.
And they had the cap waivers and things going
Yes.
forward, which is
Yes.
not going to be.
Right.
Okay.